The rain whispered as it fell, thin and cold, soaking through David Miller's coat as he knelt on the grass. 3 graves, side by side, one bouquet of fading lilies trembling in his hand. His lips moved, but no sound came. Only after a long silence he whispered, "I forgive you, but I will never forgive myself." A gust of wind carried the words away like a secret too heavy to hold. There were no cameras here, no jury, no redemption arc. Just a broken man and the 3 names carved in stone: Emily Miller, Jacob Miller, Lily Miller. David unfolded a wrinkled letter from his coat pocket, one stained by rain and fingerprints. He didn't read it. He knew it by heart. A letter never sent, addressed to a man behind bars, a man David chose to forgive. But this story, it's not about that man. It's about the one who stayed, the one left behind with silence, ghosts, and guilt that gnawed through every breath. How do you keep living when your heart is buried 6 feet under? How do you forgive yourself for surviving? This is David's story, and nothing about it is easy. Don't miss the stories that stay with you long after they end. Subscribe now and turn on the bell to join a community that feels, remembers, and heals together. More powerful truths are coming. You won't want to face them alone. David Miller wasn't extraordinary. That's what made him feel safe. At 47, he had carved out a quiet, simple life in the town of Maple Hill, New Hampshire, a place where neighbors waved, where doors stayed unlocked, where seasons passed slowly. He worked with his hands, literally. As a carpenter, he loved turning raw wood into something beautiful. It gave him a sense of purpose, of order, but nothing compared to the sense of purpose he felt when he was with his family. Emily, his wife, was a middle school teacher with a laugh that filled a room. She believed in people, in goodness, in second chances. David still remembered the way she looked at him on their wedding day, like she saw something in him that even he didn't. Then there were the kids. Jacob, 13, curious and fast-talking, obsessed with baseball cards. Lily, only 8, soft-spoken and imaginative, always drawing something on scrap paper. They were the pulse of the house, the music of every morning. David had grown up in chaos, an angry father, an absent mother. From an early age, he swore he'd never become what raised him. He wanted to give his children everything he never had: love, safety, constancy, and for a while, he did. He found healing in routine, making pancakes every Saturday, bedtime stories, fixing the squeaky stairs with Jacob, letting Lily paint his old work boots, just for fun. Their home wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was enough. But there was a shadow David never spoke of, a quiet fear, that maybe he didn't deserve this life, that one day it might all disappear. He kept that fear buried deep under smiles and dinner conversations, under Emily's hands in his, under Lily's sketches taped to the fridge. He thought love was enough to keep the darkness out. But love doesn't make you invincible, it just makes the loss unbearable. David had a dream, a simple one. He wanted to build something with Emily, not just a home, not just a family, but a place they could share with the world. For years, they talked about opening a small coffee shop downtown. Nothing fancy, just warm light, fresh pastries, shelves of books, maybe a corner for local art. They called it The Nest, because that's what they wanted it to feel like, a place where people could breathe, rest, feel safe. Emily had even drawn a logo, a tiny bird curled up inside a coffee cup. They spent weekends looking at spaces, comparing prices, making lists. Jacob wanted to help design the kids' menu. Lily had already painted signs for the bathroom doors, one with a flower, one with a lightning bolt. They had no money, no experience, just love and excitement, and the kind of belief that only families with nothing to lose seem to have. David had never seen Emily so alive. She started taking business courses online after school. He would stay up late watching videos on espresso machines and bakery ovens. At night, they'd lie in bed imagining the grand opening. Friends gathered, music playing, their kids behind the counter in tiny aprons. They were building something. Then came the silence. It started small, missed dinners, shorter conversations. Emily became distant, distracted. David assumed it was stress from work or the pressure of the shop. But one night he came home to find a note on the kitchen table. "David, I need space. I don't know who I am outside of being a mom, a wife, a teacher. I love you. But I need to figure out who I am." She'd taken the kids to her sister's house. David's world shrank in an instant. The house, once filled with laughter, felt hollow. He paced, he begged, he wrote letters, called, waited. Emily didn't answer. Weeks passed. The plans for the nest sat untouched on the dining table. The paint Lily had left on his boots was starting to crack and peel. Then one Sunday morning, the front door opened. It was Emily, tired, but smiling. "I think I found a little bit of myself," she said. "And I missed you." She moved back in that day. They decided to take a family trip. Somewhere quiet, just the four of them. A reset. They never made it back. They chose Vermont. It wasn't far from home, but far enough to feel like a break. David booked a small cabin by a lake, surrounded by trees just beginning to turn orange and gold. Emily packed board games. Jacob brought his baseball glove. Lily insisted on bringing a stuffed penguin named Marvin. It felt right, like they were stepping into the next chapter. Emily held David's hand at the gas station. Jacob and Lily bickered over which songs to play in the car. David watched them in the rearview mirror, heart full. About an hour from the cabin, the road curved through a narrow pass. Trees crowded the edges. The sun was starting to dip, casting shadows across the asphalt. David remembers the music playing. He remembers Emily laughing at something Jacob said. Then, headlights. Blinding, sudden, coming straight at them. A truck swerved into their lane. David didn't have time to react. Just a flash of white and the sound, steel crushing, glass exploding, Emily screaming, then silence. When David woke up, everything smelled like smoke and blood. His ears rang, his arms were pinned. He couldn't move. He saw Lily first, still, too still. Then Jacob slumped forward, Emily half-turned in her seat, hand outstretched toward him. David screamed, but no sound came. Later in the hospital he learned the rest. The driver of the truck, 24-year-old Ryan Harris, had been drinking, lost control after a sharp curve. His blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. He walked away with a broken arm. David's wife and children never had a chance. Doctors told him he was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That word haunted him. People brought flowers, cards, food. But David didn't want sympathy. He wanted to rewind time, trade places, disappear. He didn't attend the funerals, couldn't. His body was healing, but his soul wasn't. He saw their faces every time he closed his eyes. He replayed that drive 1,000 times, wondered if he could have swerved, sped up, slowed down. Anything to change the ending. But the ending never changed, and neither did the guilt. David didn't speak for days after waking up in the hospital, not to the nurses, not to the doctor, not even to his sister, who flew in from Oregon and sat by his bed holding his hand. He wasn't silent out of grief. He was silent because words didn't belong in a world where Emily, Jacob, and Lily no longer existed. When he was discharged, he refused to go home. He asked to be taken to a motel on the outskirts of town, a place where no one knew his name, a room with thick curtains and no family photos, no reminders. He stopped answering calls, ignored knocks at the door, let the voicemail fill up with condolences he never played. He stopped eating, let his beard grow wild, stared at the walls for hours. Nights were worse. That's when the images came back, the headlights, the screams, Lily's stuffed penguin soaked in blood. One night, he opened his laptop and typed Emily's name into a search engine. Her obituary appeared instantly. So did a news article. Drunk driver kills young mother and 2 children. He read the words over and over. Not as a husband, not as a father, but as a man reading the story of someone else's tragedy. That detachment was the only way he could survive, until one morning he couldn't anymore. He took every sleeping pill in the drawer, laid down, closed his eyes, and waited. Hours later, he woke up in the emergency room, his stomach pumped, his soul more hollow than before. A nurse told him, "You're lucky someone found you." Lucky. That word again. He felt like he was rotting in his own skin, like he was a ghost haunting a body that wouldn't shut down. His sister convinced him to come home just for a while. He walked through the front door of their house and nearly collapsed. The coffee mugs Emily collected were still lined up on the shelf. Jacob's baseball sat on the couch. Lily's shoes by the door. Everything was there, except them. David spent the next week in bed. Curtains drawn. Every sound felt like a scream. He began hallucinating, hearing Lily giggle in the hallway, catching a glimpse of Emily's silhouette in the kitchen. He knew they were gone, but they didn't feel gone. One night he sat at the dining table and placed 4 plates, just like old times. He poured water into each glass, set out silverware, then stared at the empty seats for hours. His therapist, a man named Dr. Reed, tried to reach him, sent letters, left voicemails. David never replied. What was the point? He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of surviving like this, of waking up every day knowing they were never coming back. Guilt became his oxygen. He believed it was his fault. If he hadn't planned the trip, if he had driven slower, if he had just turned left instead of right, he didn't deserve healing. He deserved to suffer. That's what he told himself, over and over, until it became the only thing that felt real. If this story is touching something deep inside you, take a moment, like this video, and share your heart in the comments. Your words might be the lifeline someone else needs today. Because healing begins when we stop feeling alone and start feeling seen. It was late October when David finally stepped outside again. Not because he wanted to, but because he felt pulled. Something unspoken had shifted inside him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was a whisper from somewhere deep, buried beneath the rubble of his grief. He went to the cemetery. Not the one where they were buried. He wasn't ready for that. He chose a different one far from home, quiet, empty, a place where no one would recognize him. He wandered without purpose until he saw an older man kneeling by a grave, thin, shaking hands holding a photo, a boy in uniform. The man was crying, not softly, loud, raw sobs that didn't care who heard. David stopped. For a moment, he considered walking away, but something kept him rooted. The man noticed him, wiped his eyes, nodded, almost ashamed. "He was my son," the man said. "Ryan. He made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Took a family from this world." David froze. He didn't speak, didn't blink. The man kept talking. "He's in prison now, and I visit him every week, but I can't fix what he did. I wish I could say sorry to them, to the man he hurt." David didn't say a word, just stood there as the world tilted. Ryan. The name echoed in his head. This was his father, Frank Harris. David walked away without a word, got in his car, sat behind the wheel, shaking. He drove home, hands numb, breath shallow. That night, he opened the drawer beside his bed and pulled out the letter he had written months ago, the one addressed to Ryan, the one he never sent. He read it again. Then he added something new. "I hate what you did, but I don't want to hate you. I want to understand how a person breaks so badly they take others with them." The next week, David requested a visit to the prison. The guards led him through metal doors and echoing hallways until he stood face to face with Ryan Harris. Neither spoke at first. Then David said simply, "I'm David Miller." Ryan's eyes welled up instantly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry." David took a deep breath. "I forgive you," he said. "But that doesn't mean I'm okay." And for the first time in a long time, David felt something shift. Not peace, but possibility. After the visit to the prison, David didn't feel healed, But he felt different. For the first time in nearly a year, he woke up and made coffee. Not because he wanted it, but because something inside him said, "Get up." He stood in the kitchen, holding the mug, staring out the window at the empty backyard where Jacob used to play catch. That same day, he opened the windows, let light into a house that had lived in shadow for too long. It wasn't a transformation, it was a moment, a small one. But it mattered. David found a grief support group that met Tuesday nights in the basement of a local church. He didn't talk at first, just sat and listened. Faces he didn't know shared stories that felt like his. A woman who lost her brother in a motorcycle crash, a father whose daughter drowned in a lake, people who spoke of pain without flinching. It made him feel less alone. Eventually, David spoke too. "My name is David. I lost my family and I'm still here. I don't know why." No one had answers, but no one looked away. Back home, he started cooking again. First just eggs, then full meals. He repaired a broken chair in the kitchen, trimmed the grass in the backyard. The work didn't erase anything, but it gave his hands something to do. His hands had always known how to build. One night, he dusted off his old laptop and opened a blank document. At the top, he typed, "Letters I never sent." That became his ritual. Each night, he'd write a letter to someone he missed. Emily, Jacob, Lily, sometimes all three. He never read them twice, never edited, just poured out what lived in the quiet corners of his soul. Eventually, he created a blog, anonymous, no comments allowed, just the letters. People found it anyway. One morning, he woke up to an email in the blog's inbox. "Your letter to your daughter saved me. I was going to take my life. Then I read your words. I don't feel alone anymore." David read that message over and over. He didn't reply, but he left the house that day and went to the park. Sat on a bench where he used to sit with Emily, and for the first time he didn't cry. He just sat and watched the world keep turning. Healing, David discovered, wasn't a straight line. Some mornings he felt like he could breathe. Others, he couldn't even get out of bed. The nightmares never really stopped. They just came less often. But when they did, they were brutal. Jacob's voice calling out, Lily's laugh cut short, Emily reaching for him just before the crash. Still, he showed up. He kept going to the support group, kept writing, kept cooking, but every step forward came with a shadow. The deeper he stepped into life, the louder the guilt became. Because with each breath, with each moment of peace, a voice inside whispered, "They don't get this. Why should you?" One afternoon, the director of the support group asked if he would speak at a local high school event, something about awareness, choices, and consequences. David hesitated but agreed. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, parents. He stood at the microphone, hands shaking. "I'm not here to scare you," he said. "I'm not here to preach. I'm here because someone made a choice and my family paid for it." He talked about that day, about Ryan, about the letter, about forgiveness. He didn't cry. But when it was over, a young girl walked up to him and said, "You're a hero." The words hit him like a slap. David smiled politely, but inside everything collapsed. Hero? He could barely forgive himself for surviving. That night he drove home in silence, sat in his car for hours in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel, trembling. If they could see me now, would they still love me? Would they be proud? He didn't know. The next day he stayed in bed, didn't write, didn't eat. The weight of being inspirational felt like a lie. He wasn't healed. He was functioning. There's a difference. That's what no one tells you about grief. It doesn't go away. It hides in quiet moments, in the spaces between kindness and guilt, between survival and surrender. But David also knew something else now. The darkness didn't own him anymore. He got up the next day, opened the curtains, brewed coffee, not because he felt strong, but because he didn't want to give up. He wasn't whole, but he was still here. And sometimes that was enough. It was at a bookstore of all places where David met Clara. He'd gone in looking for a book someone had recommended in his support group, something about grief and resilience. He didn't find the book, but he did find a quiet corner, sat down, flipped through pages of something else he couldn't even remember now. Across the aisle, a woman sat reading, late 50s, worn cardigan, tired eyes. She noticed his expression and said softly, "First time back in a bookstore?" David nodded. "First time doing anything normal," she smiled. "Same here." They got coffee afterward. The conversation started awkwardly, but grew warmer. Clara told him about her son, Daniel, 22, quiet, brilliant. Took his own life 2 years ago. "I didn't know how to keep going," she said. "And then one night I found your blog. I don't know how, I just ended up there." David froze. "You wrote a letter to your daughter, about the stars, about her drawings, about how the house still smells like her shampoo." She paused, holding back tears. "That letter kept me alive." David didn't know what to say. His words had reached someone in the dark, words he never meant for anyone to see. They mattered. He mattered. Weeks later, Clara invited him to speak at a grief retreat. He hesitated, but something in her eyes told him this wasn't about being strong. It was about showing up. At the retreat, people shared stories, heartbreaking ones, and still they laughed, cooked together, sat in silence without filling it. David stood before them and shared his story, not polished, not perfect, just honest. He ended with this: "I forgave the man who killed my family, but I couldn't forgive myself for surviving, for laughing again, for healing, until one day I realized maybe healing isn't betrayal. Maybe it's the most honest thing we can do." Afterward, Clara hugged him. "You're not alone, David. You never were." He believed her. Later that week, he returned to the cemetery for the first time in almost a year. He brought 3 letters. He sat by the graves, read each one aloud. To Jacob, "I still keep your baseball glove in the back seat." To Lily, "I wore the boots you painted to the grocery store." People smiled. To Emily, "I'm trying. I still love you. I hope you know that." Then he did something he hadn't done since the crash. He lay back on the grass, eyes to the sky. He cried. Not the hard, gut-wrenching sobs of grief, but soft, quiet tears that carried something else. Release. Forgiveness. A breeze passed through the trees, rustling the leaves, and David whispered, "Thank you." He didn't know who he was speaking to. God. Emily. The wind. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that, for the first time, he believed the world might hold something more for him, not instead of his family, but because of them. He would carry them forward, not as anchors, but as light. Grief doesn't ask for permission. It arrives without knocking, unpacks its bags, and dares you to live around it. David had learned that the hard way. For a long time, he thought healing meant forgetting, that if he laughed again, smiled again, found peace again, it would mean he was letting go of Emily, Jacob, and Lily. But healing isn't betrayal. Healing is honoring what was lost by refusing to lose yourself too. Forgiving Ryan didn't erase the pain. It didn't bring his family back, but it did something else. It gave David a door, a way out of the prison of hate, a chance to breathe again, even if just for a moment. And forgiving himself, that took longer. It wasn't a single moment. It was a series of choices, to wake up, to write, to show up, even when every cell in his body wanted to disappear. David's story isn't about finding peace in tragedy. It's about learning to carry the pain without letting it swallow you whole. It's about allowing love to keep speaking, even when the voices are gone. And it's about understanding that sometimes the most powerful act of love is choosing to stay, even when it hurts. Today, David still lives in the same house, the one with the creaky stairs and the garden Lily once planted wildflowers in. But it's different now. The walls no longer echo with silence. They hold stories, memories, and occasionally laughter. He never remarried, not because he's closed to love, but because Emily, Jacob, and Lily still live in him. Their presence isn't a shadow anymore, it's a light he walks beside. David now leads a grief support group twice a month. People come with shattered hearts, with eyes full of questions and pain, and he doesn't offer answers, only space. Space to speak, to cry, to sit in silence, to be seen. He also teaches woodworking classes at the local community center, teens, seniors, strangers, people who come not just to learn how to build with their hands, but to remember they're still capable of creating something new. And every year, on the anniversary of the crash, David returns to that same retreat where he met Clara. He reads new letters aloud, not just to his family, but to others, people he's lost, people who've helped him live. His blog still exists, though he no longer writes anonymously. Now, his name is signed at the bottom, because he's no longer hiding from his story. He's living it. What would you do if someone took everything from you? Could you look them in the eye and forgive them? Now, ask yourself something even harder. Could you forgive yourself? David's story isn't just about loss. It's about survival, about the war between love and guilt, and the quiet courage it takes to keep living when your heart feels broken beyond repair. Maybe you've felt that weight too. Maybe you've stood at your own edge, wondering if you could take one more step forward. If this story moved you, share it. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real. Because someone out there needs to hear that healing is messy, painful, and possible. Leave a comment below. What would you have done in David's place? Would you have forgiven? Would you have stayed? Subscribe for more stories like this, raw, emotional, human. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We remind people they're not alone.